10-Minute Murder contains depictions of actual crimes. What you are about to hear is real and violent in nature. Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Howdy. Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. I'm Joe, the host, and thank you for being here. While I have your attention for a few minutes, let me ask you to subscribe to 10-Minute Murder. It's a podcast where I talk about different stories of murder, sometimes well-known, sometimes obscure, and I give you all the important and interesting information in 10 minutes or less. And I know some of you probably only passed your literature classes thanks to Cliff's Notes. And this show is kind of like that, but with more blood, plus my smart mouth that I really try hard to keep to myself, but sometimes it's impossible. So subscribe to 10-Minute Murder if you haven't already. Also, let me say a huge thank you to those of you who have been sharing the podcast with your friends, like Bree on Instagram. She said she heard about it from a friend and then has recommended it to another friend of hers, and I'd like to return the favor to Bree, if I could. So everyone listening, go buy a huge chunk of her cheese. It's pretty good on fancy crackers. Okay, today's story is about a guy named Jerry Brutos. Jerry was into some things, and I don't want to kink shame, but those interests became an obsession, and that eventually turned into murder. This is the Lust Killer. Jerry Brutos was born in Webster, South Dakota, the younger of two sons. His mother wanted a girl and was not thrilled about having another boy. Reminding him how much she wanted a boy instead of him is a pretty good example of some of the non-physical abuse that she put him through. But she also physically abused him too. The family jumped around quite a bit, moving from home to home in the Pacific Northwest before settling down in Salem, Oregon. From the age of 5, Jerry Brutos had a fetish for women's shoes. He found a pair of stilettos while playing in a junkyard and was fascinated by them. I'm not sure what your school experience was like, but in mine, I had teachers that would take off their shoes toward the end of the day when their feet began to hurt from wearing heels all day. Jerry's teacher in the first grade apparently did the same, and he tried to steal her shoes, but he got caught. His fetish for shoes escalated to women's underwear. As a child, he would steal the neighbor's underwear. Jerry spent his teenage years in and out of psychotherapy and psychiatric hospitals. Also during those years, his high heel fetish turned into a bra and panties fetish that turned into physically stalking women. Sometimes he would knock them down, choke them unconscious, and steal their shoes. When he was 17, he was arrested after he abducted a girl, beat her, and threatened to stab her to death if she didn't give in to his sexual demands. He was taken from jail to a psychiatric ward of Oregon State Hospital for 9 months. While he was in there, it was determined that his sexual fantasies revolved around a hatred of his mother and just women in general. Jerry Brutos was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Despite being institutionalized, Brutos graduated from high school with his class in 1957. Shortly after graduation, he became an electronics technician. In 1961, Brutos married 17-year-old Darcy. They had 2 children together and settled in a Salem suburb. Jerry would pretty often ask Darcy to do the housework, naked, wearing only high heels. He would whip out his camera and take pictures while she did. It was about this time that he began complaining of migraine headaches and blackouts, relieving his symptoms with night prowling raids to steal shoes and lace panties. Brutos would experience a transgender period where he says he used the female persona as a form to escape. Brutos kept the shoes, underwear, and, for a time, the bodies of his victims in a garage that he would not allow his wife to enter without first announcing her arrival on an intercom that he had set up. Between 1968 and 1969, Brutos bludgeoned and strangled 4 women and attempted to attack 2 others. 19-year-old Lisa Slauson, a door-to-door encyclopedia salesperson who knocked on Brutos' door in January 1968. Brutos lured her to the basement while his mother and children were still in the house. He knocked her out with a wooden plank and strangled her. He took off her panties, bra, and shoes and put them on himself. He arranged her body in provocative poses before using a hacksaw to cut off her left foot, which he kept in a freezer and used to model his collection of high-heel shoes. He disposed of the body in the Willamette River. 18-year-old Karen Sprinkler. He abducted at gunpoint from a parking lot outside a department store in May 1968. Brutos was dressed in women's clothes during this attack. He brought her to his garage, made her try on his collection of undergarments, and pose while he photographed her, raped her, and strangled her by hanging her by her neck from a pulley. Brutos had sex with her body on several occasions and cut off her breasts to make plastic molds. Afterward, he tied the body to a 6-cylinder car engine with nylon cord and threw it in the Willamette. 23-year-old Jan Susan Whitney. Her car broke down on Interstate 5 between Salem and Albany. Brutos offered to drive her to his home with the excuse of letting her call a tow truck there. While still in the car, he strangled her with a leather strap and raped her after she died. He kept the body hanging from the pulley in his garage for several days, during which he dressed, photographed, and had sex with it. This time, Brutos cut off one of her breasts and made a resin mold of it that he used as a paperweight. Afterward, he tied the body to a piece of railroad iron and threw it in the Willamette along with Slauson's foot, which by this point had rotted. On April 21st, he attempted to abduct Sharon Wood at gunpoint while in the basement level of a parking garage. She got away. The very next day, he tried again, and 15-year-old Gloria Smith escaped Jerry. And then the following day, he grabbed 22-year-old Linda Saley from a shopping mall parking lot. Brutos took her to his garage where he raped and strangled her. He decided not to cut off her breasts like he had done in the past because he said hers were too pink. But what he did do was send electrical currents through her body, trying to make it jump. It didn't move, so he tied Linda's body to a heavy car transmission and tossed it in the river with the rest of his victims. In May 1969, a fisherman found the bodies of Saley and Sprinkler. The police asked students at a nearby university campus about suspicious men, and one led them to Brutos, who had phoned her several times to ask her for a date. Brutos gave police a false address, which increased their suspicions. At his garage, the police found copper wire that was determined to have been cut with the same tool that cut the cords to tie the bodies. Brutos was arrested, and he made a full confession. On June 28, 1969, Brutos pled guilty to 3 first-degree murders, Sprinkler, Whitney, and Saley, and was sentenced to 3 consecutive terms of life imprisonment in Oregon State Penitentiary. Though he confessed to Slauson's murder, Brutos was neither tried nor convicted for it because he didn't make and keep photographs of the body, unlike the other cases, but only of her foot. Whitney's body was found a month after Brutos' conviction, about a mile downstream from where he said he had thrown it. While incarcerated, Brutos had piles of women's shoe catalogs in his cell. He wrote to major companies asking for them and claimed they were a substitute for his pornography. He lodged countless appeals, including one in which he alleged that a photograph taken of him with one of his victims' corpses could not prove his guilt because it was not the body of a person he was convicted of killing. In 1995, the parole board told Brutos that he would never be released. On March 28, 2006, Jerry Brutos died from liver cancer. At the time of his death, he was the longest incarcerated inmate in the Oregon Department of Corrections, a total of 37 years. That's today's 10-minute murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. And just so we're clear, there's no kink shaming going on in the episode today. Just because I wouldn't dare wear a lady's pair of high heels doesn't mean you shouldn't if you're a guy and want to. That's between you and your ankles. I roll mine just trying to check the mail and slip on house shoes. That's a true story. If you like this little podcast of mine, it would make my week if you told your friends about it. If you think they might be into true crime with a short attention span, If you listen on Apple Podcasts, rate and review. A 5-star review helps out a ton. And I haven't checked today, but when I last did, it was so close to a milestone number. Connect on social media and slide into my DMs if you want. Not in a gross way, but I really like talking to you all and learning what it is that you like about the show. And that helps me mold this thing into more of what you want to hear. Plus, you can let me know if there are any murder stories that you think I should be aware of and look into for a possible episode. Now, I can't go solving crimes. I'm not Perry Mason. And I'm just now realizing that Perry the Platypus and Perry Mason, they wear the same hat and have the same name. And that can't be a coincidence. Okay, I'm hushing so that you can get back to doing your thing, whatever that might be. I appreciate you listening. Have a good night.